Welcome to the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin. In today's video, I want to share with you a great quilt pattern that I used for my all linen quilt, and I have a lot to say about it, so stay with me. So I have opinions about quilt patterns, and I have opinions about shirts too, and I have opinions about linen. I have lots of opinions, but today's video is about a really great quilt pattern for shirts, and it is the Comfort Quilt by Sharon, Holland, and it is available in the book Utility Style Quilts for Everyday Living. This is the book. And I have to say first, a big thank you to Elaine Schultz, who commented about this book in a video 2 years ago almost. So August of 2022, Elaine mentioned this book. I went and got the book from the library, read it cover to cover, loved it, ordered it on Amazon, and now here we are. So if you're looking for the book, there's a link to it in the description box below to Amazon. You may be able to find it in your library. It is really great. The premise of the book and of the patterns in this book, and all of them are pretty great, is making a quilt that's to be used. It's not an art quilt. It's not like, let's make a quilt that people want to use and use and use and use. And I noticed this quilt. It's the one behind me. If you need a visual, it's behind me on the design wall. And I just liked it instantly. There are so many great things about this pattern. I'm really going to have to not gush. But as you know, if you've seen any of these videos of mine before, there are some things about working with shirts that make them not easy for every quilt pattern. So it's, we're not working with yardage. There's a limited amount of fabric that you have in a shirt. And so sometimes quilt patterns, if they call for 2 yards of something, that's probably not going to be good for a shirt. This particular one is really great for a number of reasons. So let me start off with the pros. There are not a lot of cons, but let's start off with the pros. The pros are the blocks are reasonably sized, and you can get a lot of them out of a single shirt, and I'll come back to that. The second is because it's a pretty simple construction, it comes together quickly and easily. So if you're a beginner, or if you just need something that you don't have to really stress over, there's not a lot of matching up. There's not a lot of, intricate piecing. It's basically just 2 snowballs on opposite corners on every block. Now, the upside of that is you can do that, and it's, simple construction across the quilt top. Not just the block is simple construction, but the whole quilt top is. But there's a lot of versatility there because you can turn those blocks to get a different look with your little snowball corners. So you can do them like I did, which is how the pattern in the book suggests, or you can turn various blocks to get that a different look. So there's a lot of versatility there. If you choose a kind of singular colorway like I did, so I picked all of my fabrics in the pink and blush and peach kind of family. So just warm, soft colors. You can use a lot of shirts in it, and you don't have to worry necessarily about your placement of the blocks, because if it's a very similar color palette, and again, I'll come back to that later. So there's versatility in how you arrange the blocks, but it's very easy to do. And it comes together very quickly. And in my case, because I'm using linen, there are not a lot of angles. It's very straight, very straightforward and very straight, which works really well with linen because of the grain. So as those pieces kind of draw up in the wash and in the dryer, and yes, I put my quilts in the dryer, it crinkles up, but it'll keep the shape of the piecing, which is why I picked it, in the hope that it would do exactly what it did, which is be very, straight on the grain, square piecing, matches up nicely, and comes together quickly. So I want to tell you some more specifics about that in my experience with making this quilt top. And when I say it was quick, I think I put the whole thing together in like half a day. That's including cutting. So it really does piece quickly. And then if you don't overthink the arrangement of the colors, the whole quilt top comes together. And then I would say another one of the pros is that it scales easily. And you may be wondering what I mean by that. What I have behind me is a baby quilt, but by adding more blocks, it's very easy to scale up. So if I wanted to go to a lap quilt or a throw or a twin, it's just a matter of adding more blocks, and you don't have to rethink the block layout in order to do that. And so that's great. So for example, if I wanted to go up one size to a lap quilt, I would just add one more shirt's worth of blocks. If I wanted to go to a throw size, I would probably add 2 more shirts. So we'll talk about the details of that. Cons for this pattern, choosing a really interesting little corner piece that matches your other fabrics. I wouldn't say it's hard, but it's just part of it. So in the book, she uses a kind of blues and grays as her blocks, and then the contrasting corner pieces are like a very pale mint green and a red, which is beautiful. So works great. But if you were to choose an accent color that didn't work with all of your pieces, it could kind of be a little visually jarring. In working with linen on this pattern, the snowball corners, it's a flip and trim. So you start off with a square, sew it across on the bias, and then trim and flip it back. If you're not careful and you have a loose weave shirt or linen and you have not starched it or done something else to kind of stabilize it, it can get a little misshapen up in the corner. And so then getting your blocks to line up as you're sewing, that you either need to trim them or you just have to know, it's not going to be straight across as you're sewing your rows together. And then I forgot the pro of, I do this. I have this list of pros in my mind and I get to talking about it and I totally forget. Another pro of the quilt is, even though the blocks are very simple, both in design and layout, the proportions are right. And I think that's a very often overlooked benefit of quilt pattern designers. The ones that really know what they're doing, they get the proportions just right. So you look at it and go, oh, that's so pretty. If you made the corner snowballs, the flip and trim, a whole inch bigger, the whole quilt top would have just a slightly different look and probably not be as lovely. So Sharon did I don't know her at all, I'm calling her by first name, but she did a great job with the design of it. The proportions are right. Her color choices are beautiful in the book. And so that's a pro. So another possible detracting factor for this quilt pattern, and it's really so slight, is it does use snowball corners, and so there is some waste. Although I will say those little corner pieces are so small, it's very slight. And I don't like the waste, but I did not feel like I needed to redeem those little pieces, and I feel like I need to redeem everything. If you really don't like a flip and trim, this is not going to be the quilt pattern for you. But I think for most people, it is so very easy and manageable and really not a lot of waste in the grand scheme of things. So those are some of the pros and cons. I want to show you with some shirt pieces why I think in particular this is such a great pattern, and we can talk about a little bit more about scaling the pattern. Okay, so I want to show you some things I've learned about working with a shirt and also with this pattern, and hopefully that will give you some more reason for why this is so good. I just happen to have blocks for another project that I'm working on that are the size of the pieces that come from this pattern. And so I want to show you how I lay that out on my shirt pieces. And this is by way of preaching the message that I preach a lot, which is don't break down your shirt into smaller pieces, because you may find yourself needing to get a lot of this size block, for example, out of your shirt. And if you have cut it into 10-inch pieces or whatever, you might not get as much out of it. So I do a lot of either if I have a block that's already kind of the same size, or I'll cut a piece of paper that's the size of the block that's going to come out of a shirt, and I will lay that out so I can get a sense of how I need to cut the shirt. This particular one is fairly straightforward and logical, thankfully, and it just works out where you could just cut down the middle, and you square off this edge and then cut down the middle and then subcut your pieces. And so you can see just from this shirt back that 6 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks out of this shirt back. And this is not an exceedingly large shirt. I actually looked at the tag. It says it's a small, which I'm like, I don't think that's a small. But you can pretty reliably get 5 or 6 blocks of this size out of a shirt back. And I want to show you how much you can get out of the shirt front, and then we'll talk about how many shirts it takes to do this pattern. Okay, so here are my 2 shirt fronts. And this is the side that had the buttonhole placket. This is the one with the buttons. And so let me beat the gong again that there's more fabric than you think wrapped up in where those buttons are. I'm a person who pulls the buttons off and then seam rips that little seam. And I'll show you how that benefits me sometimes. So this shirt front, which is the left side, if I were wearing it, you can see I can get 2 more blocks because of this extra little section that was holding the button. It carries down to here. I might be able to get 3. I think I can. So there were 6 in the back, and now 5 more blocks in the 2 fronts together. So that's 11 blocks plus 1 for each sleeve if it's a long sleeve shirt. So that is 13 total blocks. Now, for the one behind me, I used 6 shirts with 6 blocks per shirt. So I didn't use the whole shirt. I just used 6 shirts and 6 per shirt, and it's a 6 by 6 square. You can do the math there. But if I wanted to have a throw size, I could just add another shirt or add 2 more shirts, and then now I can do 8 by 8. So this is what I mean by scaling. If I decided I wanted to use more of a shirt or more shirts, either one would work to accomplish this, which is to get a lot of blocks out of a shirt. So if you're wanting to really use your shirts effectively, this is a great pattern for them. And sometimes, I was mentioning this to a friend the other day, there's so much fabric in a shirt that I actually get tired of the shirt before I use all the fabric. So I'll use the 2 sleeves in one project, which is like a fat quarter. And then I'll use the 2 fronts in a completely other project because that's a fat quarter and some change. Now, meanwhile, stuff going into the scrap bin. And then I'll still have the whole back to go. And I'm like, I don't really want to use any more of this fabric. But I fold it up, put it in my fabric stash, so it will get used. But the point being, this is a great pattern if you want to use an entire shirt, or if you have a limited number of shirts and you're trying to do a relatively comfortable size quilt. So let's say you have 6 shirts. Well, if you can get 13 pieces out of it, you can make a pretty substantial size quilt just with 6 shirts. So that's a good thing to remember. I did want to show you a different quilt back by comparison that's a different shape. So here is the shirt back that I used just now. Here's another one that is a different size and shape. You can see it immediately. And so, as we know, not all shirts are created equally. So sometimes you'll get a shirt that's long but narrow, so a slim cut. Sometimes you'll have a shirt that's wider. I think it's called athletic cut. I don't know. But this is why I do the layout, because just assuming that all of the shirts that you have are the same size would maybe be a mistake. So I'm laying these out differently just to see, if I can get a different number of them out just by arranging them slightly differently. My hope here is that I'm going to be able to get more along this way, because this shirt is wider than that kind of seafoam one underneath. So it won't quite go there, but I think we can get, not quite. So this shirt, even though it's wider, because it's cut more severely at the bottom, I'm not going to get those 6 pieces. Now, of course, could maybe play around with this and get more out of it. But the idea there is that when you go to use your shirts, and this is true for any pattern, but especially if you have, kind of a substantial size block, if you take the time, a lot of times you can get more pieces out of it. So I'm definitely not going to be able to get one over here. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get much more than 5. So just kind of as a point of note, that it might be worth it to lay your blocks out, or lay a piece of paper that's the size of your block, so that you can make that decision. So that is the scaling. Use more shirts, use more of a shirt to get the blocks that you want, to be able to control how big of a quilt you want to make. And in fact, and to that point, I liked this pattern so much that I want to make it again. And I don't do that a lot, actually, because I'm still new to quilting and there are so many quilts that I haven't made yet. And so my thought was, what if I made this again with different colors and made it bigger? Not a baby quilt, but for example, a throw size or a twin size. And so I got to thinking about that, and I wanted to show you for maybe inspiration or encouragement. So here's some more of my linen. My precious. So creepy. So you can see behind me is the kind of warm blushes and pinks and reds and maybe a little orange. Here is another possible option. I'm using, this is pale green, kind of a green with a mottled blue, and then on into blue. Now, I'm not for sure going to do this, but you can see how having colors that are really similar in the same family would really make this pattern work in the same way that it does behind me, because all of them are touching each other. I mean, that sounds weird. It's like kids in the back seat, stop touching me. But with shirts, especially with memory quilts, a lot of times you have disparate fabrics, and I mean that in the colorway. So you might have a brown plaid with a solid blue and then a gray stripe. This would maybe not be the best for that particular type of shirt, because they all butt up against each other. So if you have 2 colors that clash, there's no separation there, which is something that I've said on previous great quilt patterns. Sometimes a lot of sashing or just a lot of background where they isolate those shirts, you're not having to match up plaid or put a plaid and a stripe that maybe don't go together. This particular pattern, I love it for shirts for all of the reasons that I said, but it really works best if you have kind of a cohesive group of colors. And then that way, when they're all touching each other, it's okay because they don't clash. If I had thrown in here some other color that didn't really work, and in fact, I'm not sure this one does, it might be too gray, it kind of stands out and might look like it doesn't belong. So I think this quilt works best with, like, if you do all blues, or in this case it's kind of cool colors, or you could do pinks and purples or lots of grays. It really works well with that kind of all in the same color family because they're all gonna come around each other. And she even says actually in the quilt pattern that when you're putting your blocks together to come up with the final design, it's a good idea to intentionally put some colors that are really similar next to each other, or like some dark values together, so that it doesn't look overworked or she didn't use that phrase, I did, because I've been watching Project Runway apparently. It's overworked. But the idea there is that it doesn't look too perfect. It has that, some of these are close to each other in the same value, and it's a utility style quilt for everyday living. It's a quilt you want to use. It's a quilt that you don't have to worry about. You can throw it on the floor and have your kids play on it or whatever. So I just wanted to show you that for inspiration, that you could get together a whole colorway that's just, kind of in the same family in the rainbow or in the color wheel, for example. You could do this grouping or this grouping or this grouping, and they're all around each other, and it just would look really lovely. So just food for thought. That might be a nice approach for this quilt pattern. So I have probably sung enough praises about this quilt. It really is a great quilt pattern for all skill levels, for all types of shirts, for all types of fabric. I hope it's been helpful for you to see my version of it and some thoughts that I have about it. I encourage you, find the book, get the quilt pattern. It is so fun and so easy and so quick to make. I think you're going to love it. I'm Kathy Martin. This is the Catbird Quilts. Thanks so much for watching. I can get 8. I'm sorry, I can't count. 6 blocks out of just the shirt back. Golly, Kathy. Get tired, I guess. Or, whatever. That was really weird pausing. I know, I can't help it. I can help it, but it's hard. Including, no, we'll save that for another time. No, too many pauses.
You do
too silly.
Things like, I'm the Catbird Quilts. You backed well.
Oh, I don't know.